All right, we should now be live. I'm gonna just give this a few minutes just for people to join here and for me to push this out on our FlipNormal social media. But we are going to be exploring the skeleton today. We're going to be talking about the human skeleton, all bones, the important part. This is ludicrously complicated, so we are just going to go through the important stuff. This is a little bit of a teaser, basically for an upcoming course that we are coming out with maybe in a few weeks, a month or so, called Introduction to Anatomy. Introduction to Anatomy is going to be covering this, but much more. So let's just be a little bit patient before people can start, and hopefully we should have a lot of people showing up here. You can also, of course, ask your questions as well. Just getting everything ready here on my end. All right, cool. Already a few people here. Yeah, so I suppose we should, let's just give it a little bit more time and then we can get started with that. This is our the first of a few streams we're going to be doing. We just launched our FlipNormal's, I was going to say Black Friday sale. It's the summer sale. The summer sale is going to go for now until, just for some time, where we are just having heavy discounts on a lot of our products, from ZBrush products to Blender to Cool Brushes to Alphas, bunch of different stuff, including a lot of courses from myself as well, like Introduction to Anatomy, switching to Blender Advanced Artists or Experienced Artists, Introduction to Sculpting, and a lot more. So let's just give this a little bit more time, and then we'll get started. We are using ZBrush 2022. The reason is simply because of subscription. This is a really annoying thing Pixologic, or I guess now Maxon, just did, that they used to, like, all versions of ZBrush used to be completely free, like the updates. Of course, you had to pay for the base version, but that was fine because all upgrades were free, so that was fine. But there is a really nasty thing, which means that you don't have backwards compatibility, meaning that you can never go down from a version. So if somebody sends a file in 2022, you can never open it in 2021. And now that people are going on subscription, and I'm not on a subscription, at least not yet, that means that if I make a course in 2023, people on 2022 will not be able to open it. And I mean, ZBrush is ZBrush. Really, there's nothing new in that in terms of sculpting or anything here. So yeah, feel free to ask questions in general. This stream is going to be more focused just on what's on screen. We've done more streams in the past that have been heavily focused on just all sorts of Q&As, and we find that we get a lot of the same questions over and over again. So we're going to keep this a little bit more interesting. Just wondering, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, it seems like that should be working. So unless there's anything else that if there is nothing technically wrong, then we are just going to get started. This model here is a fantastic model. This is a model I'm using in the Intro to Anatomy course for basically everything. This is an open source model. You can just Google open source Blender model, and I'll just modify this a little bit. Like I rotated around the arms a little bit because they were in a different position. This is a more neutral position. So for these streams, we're just gonna go through different anatomical things. This is stuff that's incredibly fresh for, like, in my head now, because I've been recording for the last many weeks. Just finished editing the whole course just yesterday, I believe it was, and so a lot of good anatomy stuff coming. Hopefully we should be able to push out a lot of content on YouTube as well. So the skeleton, let's talk about the skeleton. I'm going to just bring out my nice little drawing tool, just make sure that works. So the skeleton is really the backbone, in a very literal sense, of the human figure. The more I learn about figure sculpting, about creating characters, the more I learn that really it's all just about the skeleton. Like, yes, muscles are important, fat, skin, all that kind of stuff is important, but the more you learn about anatomy, the more the bones becomes important. You can talk about a bunch of different, like, you can use very fancy names for this kind of stuff. We're just going to call them skeleton, bones. People understand what we mean. So there are so many bones in the human body. How many there are is entirely irrelevant for us as artists, which brings us to an important topic about anatomy, more of an underlying topic of anatomy, and that is that we are artists and we're not saving lives. If you were to put the veins in the wrong spot or mess up the amount of ribs, honestly, as long as it looks fine, you're good. If you're a doctor, on the other hand, you would not be good, because then you would be in a lot of trouble if you were to mess up the arteries and the veins. But for us, as long as it looks fine, that's all we really care about. And this is really important to understand when it comes to learning the skeleton, because if you start to go into every single notch and cranny and everything, you are just not going to be able to learn anatomy effectively, because there are two main parts to anatomy. You can of course simplify this in a lot of different ways, but you have the main part, which is design. This is what it actually looks like at the end. This is the character design, and then we have another part that's anatomy. So I forgot how to spell anatomy. So these two parts are really, really important to understand, because if you think about these in slightly more holistic terms instead of just pure design and anatomy, what we have is the anatomy. This is something that you can measure. Anatomy is measurable, meaning that you could take a person on the street, you could put them into an MRI machine, and you could figure out exactly where the muscles go, the bones go, all that. You could be exact. You know, maybe an MRI machine wouldn't be good enough, but in theory, right, you could have something that would be 100%. But for design, you couldn't do that. You can't measure design, meaning that design is subjective. You can have somebody who draws some kind of crappy character and they just think this is the greatest design in the world, or you can have somebody who thinks this is terrible. But it's down to personal opinion. Maybe this works great for certain things, but anatomy is not like that. Anatomy can be measured. You can have an anatomy score, and that's why we focus on anatomy in a large way, because once you get this right, then you can really focus on the design. The design is really the important part of when it comes to something. Like, of course, yes, anatomy is the underlying structure and everything, but at the end of the day, you're going to be responding to the design. So if you were to purely focus on anatomy, you don't care about design whatsoever, you would have a mannequin. You would have some kind of crochet sculpture, or maybe just a realistic looking person, but it would be a really boring, realistic looking person. And if we were to focus only on design, this would be an incredibly interesting thing, but it wouldn't have any structure. You couldn't move it around. There was no way to actually to articulate the character. You couldn't rig it, you couldn't animate it, because it would just be a really interesting blob of flesh poking around. So these two concepts are really, really, really important, and this also brings us into why we have to simplify anatomy, because anatomy is just too complicated. Like mentioned, you have so many bones in the body, and just looking at this kind of stuff, right? Like, this is just insanely complicated. You can take a PhD in this spot here, I'm sure, and you could gather all the people in the world who has PhDs in this, and you would still not know everything there is to know about the skeleton. Just meaning that this stuff is complicated. And when I say it's complicated, this is really, really complicated. So we have to simplify that. And that's what we are going to be doing in today's video. Well, I guess today's live stream. And also in the Intro to Anatomy course as well. So let's get started with that. So we are going to have to just simplify this into like simpler forms, like we mentioned. The first thing we have to be aware of is really the core of the body. And that core is going to be the spine. So here we have the spine in the body, and the spine really has three main parts. Again, everything we're talking about now is approximate. It's good enough for us to learn. It's not, a doctor would look at this and be like, yeah, not 100% true. And we'll be like, cool, I'm doing monsters, you're saving lives, let's focus on what we're good at. So with that said, it has three parts. It has the neck part. This is called the cervical part. It has the middle part called the thoracic part. This is the rib cage part. And then we have the lumbar part. This is what you have. I'm currently sitting on a chair, and this chair has lumbar support. And that's this part here. And you see here it starts with C, which is the cervical part. This is actually a hint of the shape when it comes to the actual shape of it. Like it's actually C-shaped. So what we have is, let's start off with a C. It starts off like that. And this is not just this is random that it's like that. But we have the first C going this way. Then we have the second C going this way, just a regular C curve. And then we have a third C, which is going this way here. And as you can see, this is really nice and balanced. If you just were to draw a line through this, crappy line, I'm very sorry, but if you just were to draw a line through this, a bit awkward angle of my tablet, then you would see, if this was not a terrible line, that this would be actually pretty balanced. So this is what you want in a skeleton as well. Stuff needs to be balanced. If something isn't balanced, you're going to overexert muscles and there's going to be pressure on bones you don't want to have. You want this to be as balanced as possible. So this is really how you would do it. You have 3 C's, 1 C, 1 C, and 1 C. And this is really, really important because this means that you can very easily just get down a quick gesture in the body. C, C, and then C. And what you should also observe, this is actually a pretty common mistake as well. People put the spine all the way out, but what you can see is that yes, there's a spine going through here, like so, and then we have this part going into the middle, like so, and then the actual like the spines here. These are just called like spines, pointer bit. Whenever you hear pointer bits, you should think muscle attachment. This is really the spine. Like all of this is the spine. So if we were to draw down something like this, then you see this goes basically to like almost the 1/3 mark. So this is just important. Just observe. It's almost a halfway point. Just observe how incredibly deep the spine actually goes. So this is really, really important. Also, heads up, we're not really going to be doing all the sculpting now. This is going to be an anatomy lecture. So this is important. You need to understand the anatomy before we start to get into sculpting. We'll probably sculpt more later this week, but for now, all anatomy. This stuff is useful stuff. This is the foundation for everything. So that's the spine. Very simple. Curve, curve, and then we have a curve right here. Next up, we are going to have a look at the rib cage. The rib cage is also ludicrously complicated, and that means we also have to simplify this down. Every single bone we are talking about, every single element of the body, we are going to have to simplify down. The way we simplify down the rib cage is into an egg shape. And again, apologies for my horrendous drawings, where we're just drawing an egg, and then we are just drawing in an actual gap here on the bottom. So if we just draw on top of this, you can see that this goes down like so, and goes a gap in here. And this is really useful. This is very, very, very handy to think about. Purely technical terms, you have 10 ribs going into the sternum part here, and then we have 2 ribs going into the back here. So 2 floating ribs at the end. So that's how you can simplify the ribs in a pretty simple way. From the side view, you can notice that we have 2 lines this way. This is a bit stylized, doesn't really go this way, but it's really handy to think about them going this way, because then we have a few angles. We have the angle of the jaw, we have the angle of the cheekbone, we have the angle of the hips here as well. And this just helps you to solidify things. There are a lot of times when you are working with humans like this, or just with characters, that again, anatomy is so complicated that the more you can turn into symbols, the easier it is. So some of these things are not going to be 100% true, but they're true enough to give you the overall direction you're going in. And I just had to turn on a fan because it's getting warm here in London. So just checking in, can everyone see me fine? And just making sure the stream is actually working. Should be fine, I reckon. So that's one part of the rib cage. Really, really, really useful to keep in mind that this is just an egg shape, like so. Next up, we have the clavicles. So actually, not next up. We aren't done with the rib cage yet. So what we're looking at here in the middle of the rib cage, we have 2 shapes here. really one big shape, but two. You can break this down into 2 or 3 shapes. This is called the sternum, and the sternum is really the point where the ribs attach into this. The way you can simplify down the sternum is either as a dagger, which has a dagger shape like so. You can think about this as like the protector, the hand protector, whatever this is called. So this will go like so, and this is the top part. It's important to know that this has 2 parts, and this goes like so, and then you have the blade, and then you have the tip of the blade as well. Or you can think about this as a tie. There's a tie that goes around here, and here is the knot. This is generally really useful to think about this, because this is going to help a lot with the construction of the ribcage. From the side view as well, you can see here we have the 2 planes from this. We have the main sternum part, and then we have this part here, column manubrium. And you can just see the angle of this, just how much of an angle this goes or has here. And this is also where like the pecs is going to be attaching. Like if you were to actually look at the muscles here, you can see that the muscles are going to go from here down like so, up here, and yeah, this attaches. So one of the reasons why the skeleton is so darn important is because it's muscle attachment. If you don't have the skeleton, you literally will not know where muscles are going to and from. We can actually just talk about that just a little bit. Muscles are so connected with bones in a very literal sense. It's if you don't have the bones, you cannot have muscle attachments. Muscles are not just kind of floating about and getting bigger and smaller. Muscles are attached to bone. So for instance, if we were to look at this, you can see that the bicep here goes to bone, and then it goes to bone, and it has 2 parts. It has the tendon that are inflexible parts that connect bone to muscle, and then it has the actual muscle belly, like so. And it's really tempting to just get started with this. Just get started with just throwing in a big bicep here and such. The problem is if you don't attach this to bone, you will not be able to sculpt this in a realistic sense. You might be able to kind of cheat it if you have a static pose, but if you have any kind of movement, there's literally no way you can sculpt this, because this is so complicated. So this is why we really focus on the skeleton. Well, one of the reasons. Another one is we're going to be talking all over the place, and this one is not just going to be the skeleton. We're going to focus mostly on the skeleton, but when we talk about skeleton, this is all over the place. Everything is connected to the skeleton. Another thing is proportion is derived directly from the skeleton. Proportion isn't really a thing, meaning that if you were to take this guy here into an MRI machine, or myself, throw me into an MRI machine, the doctors will not be able to find proportion. It's not like bone or muscle or something. Proportion is simply the relationship between different distances, angles and such in the body. It's just how large is something compared to something else. So what's important to note here is that if you take this deeper, instead of just thinking about proportion in a generic sense, yes, it's useful to think about the fact that the groin is about halfway, and to think about that the upper arm is about the same length as the lower arm. All that stuff is useful. But what's more useful is to think about that this is an actual skeleton. There is an actual skeleton here. Let's say this guy here is like an average male height of like 180 centimeters. Then what if we were to take the femur here and make this short? What would happen to his height? Well, he would now be probably about 160 tall, because we just shortened his femur. What if we were to take his arm and like his humerus up here, and instead of his humerus being like this, however long this is, 40 centimeters, I have no idea, and make it like down here? Well, now he has a ludicrously long arm. And this is what you would have to think about when you're dealing with proportion. Proportion is in a large way simply just down to the length of the bones. If somebody has wider shoulders, well, you would have longer clavicles, longer scapula, and you would have, in all likelihood, longer bones here as well. The bones would simply just be longer or thicker. In large part, just longer, but if they were to get longer, they should also probably get thicker, or otherwise they would be too fragile. So that's really important to keep in mind, that bones really determine proportion. We talk a lot more about this in the Intro to Anatomy course. Also, just remember that we have a summer sale going on right now, so we have plenty of really good products on the store. So for instance, we have the eye kit, which is really, really good kit. So I'm just going to show you a few of these products throughout. This was used on the Jinx project. This is fan art, of course, but fantastic. It was used in PUBG, I believe it was called, for their marketing materials. So really, really high quality stuff. Just drag and drop the eyes in here and you have realistic eyes right away. Back to the anatomy. So the bones determine height. They determine length. They determine everything. Super, super important stuff. And then we are going to be talking about the clavicles. The clavicles are these two bones right here. Also, if I, for some reason, call the clavicles a scapula and the scapula clavicles, that is just a me issue, and I apologize for that. Something's confused these two. The clavicles are attached to the sternum right here, and they also attach down here in the scapula as well. This is really important to keep in mind because it means that, for instance, if you were to raise your arms, you would also be raising your clavicles as well. The simplest way to think about the clavicles is if we just throw away his head like so, then we have the clavicles. So the clavicles is basically just a bow and arrow. If you look at this from the top, see here, we just have a bow and arrow. This is just the string between, and then this here is just the bow shape. And we even have the attachment point where you would be holding the bow in the middle as well. So this is a genuinely useful metaphor or analogy for remembering the scapula. Sorry, just the collarbones, the clavicles right here. The reason how you can think about this as well in terms of getting the curve right, this is really important, getting the curve right. The way you can think about this is if you were to move your shoulders backwards, meaning that this would pivot from here and this would go more backwards like so. So this will go back here. This would be, if this was straight like so, then you would choke and die if if this was straight, because now you would have all the pipes here, all the air, all the nerves, all the everything here. This would just be crushed. But if you have stuff here like so, and then this goes around and this is round, boom, you are not choking and dying, which is preferable. So that's the clavicles. Attached to the clavicles are some bones that everyone seems to really oversimplify. These are the shoulder blades or the scapula. So this is a really, really important one. If you understand the scapula, then you can unlock the back. If you don't understand these two bones, you are never going to be able to understand the back. You're never going to be able to figure out anything here. Often, if you are in trouble when it comes to the scapula, or in terms of the back, it's because you have no idea what's going on with the scapula. But not just for the scapula, also for the arm as well. So let's explore this incredibly complicated guy. This is where you have to just simplify this down. So the way you can simplify this down is basically into a triangle. Like so. The distance between the scapula is generally the width of a human head. So I'll just close perspective as requested in the chat. So that's off now. So here you can see is about the distance of a human head. Proportions like this are never fully accurate. Somebody has a bigger head, their scapulas do not shrink, right? So then there's going to be a bit of a distance here. There's a lot of variation there. So this is really useful. This is it's very useful proportion, just what is the distance, but also just simplifying down into a triangle. But simplifying it down into a triangle is not enough, because as we can see from this side, from the top and the bottom, this goes out into two parts. It goes out here, and then it goes out here as well. So let's explore these two guys. Again, we're not going to go too in depth about these, the glenoid fascia, all these names, not really that relevant. It's more important about the function. So what you're seeing here is that we have, we basically have a ball socket. You see here, we basically have just a ball socket, and this is where the arm attaches. This is where the humerus attaches, and this allows you to rotate this around. You can really see this, how you can rotate out around your arms like this. Really useful stuff. If this was not this nice and round, you would not be able to do this. Then we have another point, which is this guy here. This is the spine of the scapula. Spine is something similar to this as well, but this is what we have here. There's a spine of the scapula, and this goes out into a square pretty square point called the acromion process. The acromion process is worth memorizing. Just acromion. You can just Google that acromion process, or you can just look at a chart of the scapula. The reason this is so important is because this is going to be drastically changing the silhouette of the character, and is also where the clavicles attach, and is also where the deltoid will be attaching as well. So the way you can simplify this is that the clavicles go in here, and then we have the scapula going in here. So basically it goes like so, and then the other one goes just like so. So these two are going to be attaching. Really, really useful. And then you can also see we have a little finger here as well. This is where the bicep is going to be connecting. So you can even see there's a bit of like a notch here for the bicep. One is going to go here, one is going to go more in here. So that's the scapula for you. Plenty of stuff is going to be connecting to all here. There was a question here about which reference is this. Just search for Blender open source anatomy model, and you're going to be finding this. I think it's called Set Anatomy or something like that. This is, I've just taken that, removed all the complexity from it, deleted a crap ton of muscles, because this is what you have, and I've rotated the arm as well a little bit, and there is an insane level of complexity like inside the neck and all that, so I've just removed a lot of that. But yeah, this is a modified version of that. Yeah, here's a great question as well with William. What courses would you recommend to learn anatomy? The one I would recommend is the one that's not out yet. It's the Introduction to Anatomy. It's the one I've been working on for the last few months. I reckon it's out in about a month or so just keep your eyes out for that. There weren't really a lot of courses out there for just learning anatomy. Going through what I'm going through now without overcomplicating it, I find that either the anatomy courses, they just go through absolutely everything. They're just like A to Z. Let's go through every single bone and muscle and fascia and fat pattern and all that. Or they're just too abstract. So in this course, we are doing very similar to what we're doing now. So let's talk more about the skeleton. So let's have a look at this. Let's talk about what connects to the scapula. So what connects here is going to be the humerus. The humerus is this big cartoon-looking bone right here. This is basically a bone that it's round up here, then it goes down like so, and this is important. Here we have it's round up here because it rotates around, and then we have two pointy bits here. The names of these two guys is not particularly relevant. This is where you just need to know that they exist. When you're seeing pointy bits in the skeleton, you're seeing all sorts of stuff. You should just think muscle attachment. Like this is just true time and time again. Muscle attachments, muscles attached to bones, and particularly if you have some of these pointy bits, this is where they should just light up like a firefly. Muscle attachment. And the reason I'm focusing so much on this is because if you understand this, then you can really figure out the forearm. If you don't understand this, you cannot figure out the forearm. Like that's straight up impossible. So let's have a look at this one. This is really the complexity you need for this. It's round up here, goes down into two pointy bits right here. And here you can see if we were to just look at the muscles. In a large way, you have the pointy bits here. This is the one we just talked about. You can really simplify down in muscles. We'll probably talk more about this in a future stream. You can really simplify down in forearm muscles as just something that goes out of the pointer bits. And same here as well. This here just goes from here, and then just goes down like so. So these two guys, really, really useful. And then we have two bones of the forearm. We have the ulna, which is this guy here. This is the one that actually connects to the elbow. This point here is the elbow. So there's nothing fancy about that. It's just that. And then we have the other one. This is called the radius. The way I think about this is the radius is connected to where the thumb is. And you can just think about the thumb as being massive, just like a cartoony hand where everything is fine. And then you just have a normal thumb or normal fingers and just a giant thumb, because the radius of this is so large. So this is really, really useful. You need to understand that you have 2 bones in the arm. Otherwise, you can't rotate this around, and you can't really figure out anything when it comes to the muscles. So very, very, very useful. iMac is saying set anatomy. Yep, that's the one. Just get just download that one, completely free. I believe this is based on work in a university or something, and I think the model came out in 2013 or something, and then somebody ported it to Blender. And then we have the hand. The hand is complicated, but what you can basically simplify it into is you have the bones here. These are not fingers. These guys here, not fingers. If you were to do that, you would have a ridiculously small hand right here, and you would have first 4 joints in your 4 bones in your finger, and that would not be great because that would look really, really weird, but also they would be insanely long. So all this stuff here, this is just basically just a common mass, and this is something you see a lot of the time where you just have a common mass in certain areas. And then these guys here, these are called the phalanges. For the thumb, same with big toe, you only have 2, and for the other fingers you have 3. This is pretty interesting as well. You can measure this on yourself. On myself, this is pretty much true. This depends a little from person to person, but the distance from here to here on me is equal to the distance from here to here. So the first joint or the first bone is basically twice as long as the next ones. And you can also see here as well, this one here is also much longer than this one here. So they get progressively shorter as you go in, and this is where this is the way you can think about this is if you were to put your finger in a fist like so, the reason the bones are the way they are is because if these were not the length, you wouldn't really be able to close your fist. Imagine if these were like equal in size, it would look like this. If you were to close your fist, and you couldn't really put it into a proper fist. This is an excellent question. To what level do you need to know anatomy? That depends entirely on what you want to do, to be honest. If you're a doctor, you need to know at a really high level. If you're a stylized artist, you need to know it to a way more basic level. I still really recommend, no matter what, that you learn it to a decent level. You know, granted, if you want to be a character artist. If you don't want to be a character artist, don't worry about that. If you want to be an environmental artist, learn sculpting, just because that's really useful when it comes to just rocks and everything and such like that. But anatomy is a whole different beast. I find it to be useful as a character artist. Like if you're serious about being a character artist, I find it to be really useful to learn what we're talking about now in this video. I'm probably going to be covering most of this, but in this video here, but then also learn the muscles. This takes a lot of time. Learn the individual muscles to as a high degree as you can. Some you can cheat, like the forearm, but for instance the arm, you need, if I'm showing you this muscle here, you should go like boom tricep, boom lats, boom trapezius, right? That's the kind of stuff that just needs to just be there, just instant. You just have to go boom. It would be like if you were to read in like English, right, the word this, like whatever, you know, whatever your understanding of language, you just need to go boom, hey, immediately. Because if you're trying to like construct this kind of stuff, if you're trying to go H-E-Y, hey, then you're just going to be in trouble, because it's going to take you too long to do anything. It's going to take you too long to read, to learn, too long to write, and too long to say anything. If you can just instantly just go boom, pecs, pectoralis major, clavicular section goes in here, then you can create things really, really fast. So the annoying answer is, if you are serious about doing character art, you actually have to take anatomy really seriously, and you need to spend proper time on that. The way I see it is, like, I keep comparing this to a language. If you want to be a writer in like, let's say you want to be a writer in anyone who speaks Spanish, you need to just learn the words. You just have to learn the words, because if you don't know the words, you're gonna have to look things up all the time, gonna break your flow. And if you do know the words, if you do know muscles, you can just say what you want to say right away. And what you want to say is big monster with with giant claws. You can just like whip that out real quick. But if you can't do that, you're gonna have to watch tutorials and everything. And you obviously can't do that. Yeah, here's a good one as well. I mean, for environmental, you need to know the basic proportion for props that interact with people, like chairs and ladders. Yeah, definitely. But you don't need to know anatomy for that, right? For that, you can just have a generic person, throw them into the scene, and then you can do that. But yeah, the hardcore anatomy is something that you need to know if you are a character artist. There are some people who don't really know it, but it's just such a shortcut for getting good characters. So that's basically the upper body. Let's talk about, well, the last part of the upper body, which is the hips. The hips is so interesting. And here's actually a question for you guys. This is something I'm genuinely wondering about, and I think I have the answer, but I just want to verify this. So the way I'm phrasing this is that this line here is the dividing line between the top and the bottom body. So the upper body and the lower body. So this line here is where we have the iliac crest here, and it goes down here into the pubic bone and such, and you have the sacrum back here. What I think about is that there are no muscles that keep going between, like, there are no muscles that goes from below this line to above it, and there are no muscle that go from above this line to below it. This is a genuinely useful way to think about anatomy, because it means that you can very effectively separate out the body in these two, like basically in this line here. Nothing crosses this line. Now that's my question to you all. Is this 100% true? Are there any exception to this rule? Like, I don't mean like weird nerves or something. Just, are there any main muscles that do overlap this? So here we have the hips. The hips are very complicated. So it's one of these things you can definitely take a PhD in, just the hips by themselves. And they're so complicated that we are going to be simplifying them quite a lot, because if you're trying to get all this complexity into your characters, it's just not going to work. So the way we do this is we draw, hopefully don't get a copyright strike for this, but we draw Mickey Mouse. So I haven't really looked at Mickey Mouse in a while, but this is actually a 100% accurate version of Mickey Mouse. What's important about this 100% accurate representation of Mickey Mouse is that we have these two ears. If you just were to think about the Mickey Mouse ears, this is how you can simplify down the hips as well. So you can draw out this 100% accurate Mickey Mouse version here. So we have his ears like so, and notice the ears have a bit of a gap on the bottom as well, and that's what we're going to be drawing in as well. So we're going to just get in this gap as well. Once you have the Mickey Mouse ears with a little gap in the middle, almost looks like he's smiling. Looks weird, but once you have this, you've actually got the main landmarks from the hips. What we're seeing is here, if you just were to follow the ridge of the ears, the iliac crest. If you say iliac, ilium, anything like that, just think hips. Then if you were to follow this, we now have the iliac crest. The iliac crest is insanely important to understand. There are a lot of things in the body that's not crazy important to understand. This is important. I can't spell today. Okay, there we go, iliac crest. And then we go down here as well, and this is a pubic bone. Whenever you see stuff like this, you can be sure that there's going to be muscle attachment. So if you look at this from the side view, if we just were to enable symmetry, you can see that it goes, basically we have the same angle, kind of going up like so, and then it goes down like so. And here we have a point, and here we have a point. This point here will be the dimples. And also I can't draw arrows. Let me try again. This point here will be the dimples on the back, and this here is called, they both have stupidly fancy names. This is called the asses, meaning it is as it is. That's how you can simplify this. If you start to deconstruct these kind of names, you're just not going to remember them. This is this is live, and of course you can just ask questions, and I might answer them. And feel free to just watch this recording afterwards as well. This is going to be up on YouTube. So, iliac crest, stupidly important. This point here also stupidly important. And whenever you see pointy bits, bony bits, think muscle attachment. And that's exactly what we have for this entire ridge right here. In the back here we have the sacrum as well. This is just a little triangle. Don't worry too much about this kind of stuff. This just gets really complicated. If you start to go in here, we're looking at all the holes and stuff. This is so wacky that it looks like an alien. You can actually kit bash this, and there's some pretty interesting alien characters. Then we have this part here, which I might be mispronouncing, but I keep pronouncing this as the ischium. This is just like the sitting bones. This is where you where you're sitting, as you might have guessed. This entire thing is where you're going to be sitting. You know, if the legs are going out like so, you're going to be sitting here. And this is also important because this is where you have muscle attachment. You guessed it. Boom, hamstrings going down like so. Kinda. Imagine this, but better. So it's just going to go down here. And if you see a line like this, I just mentioned it. Boom, muscle attachment. And the muscle here is going to be the butt. This is the gluteus maximus and gluteus medius muscles. The gluteus medius is going to go from like here down here, and the gluteus maximus is going to go from like here. It actually goes into the sacrum, and it goes down here as well. And I just need a little bit of water because I've been talking for quite some time now. Yeah, the more you learn about the hips, the more impressive the hips go. The hips are just completely bonkers. Cool. So I've been able to hydrate a little bit. What you should also note here is if you look at this from the, let's cut away this and look at this from the front. You can see here we have the pubic bone right here. These are the pubic bones and muscle attachment. Whenever we see pointer bits, muscle stuff like the bone stuff like this, think muscle attachment. And that's exactly what we have here. The abs are going to go from here and then just go down here into the pubic bones. Again, it's what I was talking about in the beginning. If you don't have muscle attachments, if you don't have bony attachment like this, you cannot get the muscles right. The abs, for instance, are just they're not even that complicated. They're just going from like basically a vector from up here to down here. And if you know that, kinda simple. There's nothing simple about any muscle. It is just all complicated, but pretty good. Adam is asking, Henning, please can you see if the major pectoral muscles are attached correctly on your model? Pretty sure this is correctly attached on this model. It has 3 parts here. It has the clavicular section, it has the sternal section, and then it has the rib section right here. This model here is really useful. It's not a particularly pretty model. That's something to keep in mind as well, that I'm using this purely as like reference for the anatomy. In terms of like design, can't use it for that. I'm sure there are tons of anatomical mistakes in this as well, like there is in every single model as like in general. So that's the hips. We can keep talking about this forever, but that's a simple version of the hips. I'm just going to see how long we've been live for so far. Wow, 43 minutes on the dot. So then we have to do the bottom part as well, and that's basically the same as the top part in terms of the arms. So we have the femur. The femur is really important. The femur is this bone that is in the thigh, and there's only one bone here, like with the upper arm. There are a lot of similarities between these two. So the similarities are one bone here, one bone here. They go out into pointer bits, condyles and epicondyles. They are round up here, pointer bits. They're round up here, like so, and like so. So there are a lot of similarities. This bone here is also massive. This is the one, if you were to be in caveman times, this would be the bone you would use as a weapon because it's massive and has a notch. More similarities is that there are 2 bones in the forearm or in the lower leg, like so as well. And a lot of similarities in terms of the muscles as well. So if you were to compare these two, it's really useful to think about these as comparable units. Also, if you want to see something cool as well when it comes to anatomy, you should just Google comparative anatomy. The reason that's cool is because comparative anatomy really deals with, at least comparative anatomy in animals, that's going to deal with similarities between humans and animals, which is really cool. So many similarities. If you were to look at a chimpanzee skull or chimpanzee skeleton, gorilla skeleton compared to just a Homo sapiens skeleton, it's basically the same thing, just with different proportion, which just means what I was talking about in the beginning. If anyone's watching that long, that is that there is a significant, or what changes your look significantly is going to be the skeleton. So here we have the femur. The femur goes has an oblique angle, diagonal angle here, and it has a diagonal angle this way. This is important. The femur does not go straight down. It goes diagonally, and then it goes diagonally like so. This is really, really important. And then we have a point up here called the greater trochanter, just GT. This is also a really useful one. Whenever you see the muscle attach, or you see pointer bits, think muscle attachment. This is where the one of the butt muscles are going to be attaching. And then we have the patella. We don't have, or kneecap, if you will. You don't have anything comparable to this in the like in the arm. This is just a bone that goes on top of this. If you want to learn how to construct a patella or the knee in general, this is actually, it gets complicated, but you can cheat this in a quite useful manner. So if you look at this, we have the you have the two bones, right? We haven't got to the second bone yet, but we have the bone here, which is the femur, and then we have the tibia going right here. So we have two bones, like so. And then we have a third bone. It basically goes in between these two bones. So far, not crazy complex, but also not crazy useful. This is not what a knee looks like. But if you start to add some complexity to this, we have a ligament right here. A ligament is something that connects bone to bone. A tendon connects bone to muscle. So we have a ligament, and this ligament goes to around here. This is something that you can think about this basically as a belt, like a leather belt. It doesn't really compress or stretch. It's just a leather belt right here. And then we have like some muscles going over here, like so, like the quadriceps, and they're going to form a common tendon going in here. And then we have fatty pads going on either side, like so. So once you have this, you're kind of constructing the knee. So basically we have the patella, we have the ligament going down like so, and then we have fatty pads here, which whenever you have fat as a structural element, that's when you get weird stuff, because bone is kind of reliable. At least, bone is kind of a bone. It doesn't really squash or stretch or really change that much when you get older. But fat does. Fat is weird. So whenever you see fat, think weird. So that's why we have so much variation in the knee, because there's a lot of variation in the fat. So that's kind of how you can cheat the knee. How are you doing the marker thing? This is a great question. This is called Epic Pen. I'm using a paid version of it, but you have a free one as well. I have this, and I have it set to a Stream Deck that I have right next to me. So I just have a hotkey for hiding, unhiding, and for clearing it. And then I also have some custom hotkeys as well for colors. So this is really useful. It allows me to really create colors real fast. So this is transformed how I do tutorials. You used to have to do like some crappy print screen and draw on top or into Photoshop, but no longer. Epic Pen to the rescue. The free version of Epic Pen doesn't have colors, but whatever. If you don't need that, you don't need that. Also, just speaking of Epic Pen, just a little reminder. I guess speaking of Epic Pen, I'll draw with that. Just a little reminder that we have 70% off a lot of different tutorials on flipped normals. So that's really useful. We just started the summer sale today, and we have tons of awesome sculpting tutorials on offer. Let me see if we can find some of these. We have one that I'm very happy with. To see how it goes. I'll just show you guys some of these ones. But yeah, while I'm doing this, just taking a little bit of a mental break as well. This stuff is pretty intense to teach. Then just comment your questions, and I'll see if see what I can answer. This could be anatomy questions or just general questions in general. So here we have Introduction to Sculpting. Introduction to Sculpting is a course I made some years ago now. I think 2 years ago. It's about 14.5 hours. And you learn how to do this guy from scratch, but also you learn how to do stylus sculpting. You learn about anatomy. You learn all sorts of stuff. Gesture, rhythm, sculpting over, student work. There's a lot of stuff here. So if you're new to sculpting, I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. I'm going to leave this in the chat. So very, very, very useful course. And I'm basically doing the follow-up to that one now, which is the one I've been talking about, which is the Introduction to Sculpting. So I'm thinking that you could, like the logical way to go would be first Intro to ZBrush, and then it would be Intro to Sculpting, and then it would be Intro to Anatomy, and then you have a pipeline that you can very effectively learn how to create characters. When sculpting hands, what would you suggest the pose to be? That depends what you're sculpting for. If you're sculpting for production, then you need to work in a more neutral sense. If stuff is like in a fist for production, for instance, then you are in trouble, because there is so much. You're always gonna have to push this out again. Sculpt it in a more neutral way, or in like splayed out way like this. Talk to your rigger. But like I prefer to have a little bit like if this is a finger, have a little bit of a curve point here, so you can really easily see where one finger begins or one joint begins and one ends. But basically that's something for production. You just have to talk to your rigger. Different riggers prefer different things. David is saying, "Hi Henning, I just finished your realistic character masterclass. I'm very happy with the results. Thank you so much for that." Yeah, thank you so much. Realistic character portrait masterclass was one hell of a course we made last year. That's I'll show you that as well. This is a course where we show you how to create a fully pretty realistic character using ZBrush, Blender, and Substance Painter. Just going through how to, like, all the steps. This is like, what, 20 hours of content. Intro to Anatomy is also like 16 hours, so it's a lot. So just going through and showing you how to make this character here from scratch. All the sculpting in ZBrush. Covering a lot of stuff we're talking about now, actually, like in terms of the anatomy, the skull, doing the retopo in Blender, doing the UVs in Blender and ZBrush, painting in Substance Painter, and then setting up the whole thing in Blender, rendering using cycles with the LUT called AGX. So yeah, showing you how to do this whole thing. So yeah, I'm just gonna drop a link to this one here. Joel is asking, have you gone through the shoulder yet? Yeah, we have gone through the shoulder. Just specifically how you connect the shoulder bone to the scapula collarbone is something we have talked about. So just go back in the sculpt. The gist of that, though, just as a quick repeater here. This is useful because we can always repeat this stuff. You have the acromion process up here. Basically goes into a square, and then here we have the clavicle, right? So you can simplify this into a shape like so. Just pause the stream, take a screenshot of that, and save it to your folder. So that's the femur kind of for you. Let's see. Yeah, we have the great trochanter up here. We have the condyles. These are again pointer bits down here, which muscles are going to be attaching to. You can see here in the muscle that we have the gastrocnemius going in here and attaches around up here. And then let's have a look at the lower leg. So this is where we have two bones. We have the tibia right here, and then we have the fibula right here. So this is tibia. I need to stop writing because I'm terrible at writing like this. So tibia and fibula, really useful to think about this. The way I think about this, I'm going to give you guys a stupid mnemonic here, but Tibet, the country of Tibet, is bigger than a fiddle. Just makes sense. Country is bigger than a household object. So Tibet is bigger than a fiddle, which just means that the tibia is bigger than a fibula. So these are these two guys here. What's important about these two is that we have, well, plenty of important things. Two important things is that we have the ending parts right here, the bottom parts of it. Again, pointer bits. And if you notice these two, they have an angle going up like so. And this is really important because this is something that you see over and over and over again, that this angle goes up like so. It's almost like a frowny face, like so. Yeah, Dennis P has a good question. We can do a little bit of Q&A here and there. Any thoughts on a writer strike? Is affecting quite a lot of people right now with contracts that can't get extended. I mean, yeah, I really hope that they can wrap that up. It's really affecting VFX. Luckily, hopefully a lot of shows are dealing with non-US shows, like in the UK, for instance, where I'm currently at. They're like the BBC isn't striking, right? The UK-based writers aren't striking, it's only the Hollywood ones. So hopefully that's going to ramp up as well. But yeah, it's definitely an industry problem that they're striking. I haven't really been following the strikes so much, like what they want and such. I'm sure they have their legit causes, but in terms of just work for VFX, definitely causing issues with that. Will you ever make a Mari course? Maybe. The thing is with Mari is that Mari is an excellent software, but not a lot of people are using Mari, and a lot of people are going over to Substance Painter instead of that. So it would make sense to look at Painter for making tutorials. It takes a long time to make a tutorial, and we want to make sure that it reaches a lot of people. So maybe we are making a Mari course. And that's almost it for the legs. Let's have a look here. These are very similar. The feet are very similar to the hands in the sense that we have carpals on the hands, we have tarsals on the foot, we have metacarpals, and we have metatarsals. And this is again the same thing with the hand as well. If you haven't seen that, just go back to the stream where we talk about that. This is where we have in the big toe, we have 2 bones, and in the other toes, we have 3 toes. If you want to see something wacky about toes, you can look at toes or feet from before people started wearing shoes, like ancient skeletons or ancient, maybe more importantly, ancient footprints, because they go way more out like this. Currently, our toes are like all crushed over like so, and it's a large part due to the fact we're wearing shoes. But if you look at like footprints from like 20,000 years ago and such, which you have plenty of, then they go way more out like this. Do this information what you will. Where is MJ? Well, MJ has a family and needs to take care of that. And I'm now doing late night sculpting because I'm a bit more flexible. Hopefully MJ is gonna join us in future sculpts as well. We were planning on him having a session today, but he wasn't feeling well, so I'm taking over today as well. So I mean, that's really it for the skeleton. We covered really everything, all major landmarks, all major things when it comes to the skeleton. It's very complicated. This stuff gets very complicated, and well, the only one we haven't talked about is the skull, but that's a whole different beast onto itself. So that's something we can probably talk about in a separate stream. We've been live for almost an hour now, which I was thinking about doing this for maybe 2 hours or so. So I'm just gonna take a little break now. I've been talking for about an hour. It's pretty hard stuff to do. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions as well. And there are some really good ones here. I'll probably talk about this in a bit. So the skeleton is just so important. The skeleton is almost annoying because the skeleton is not one of these sexy parts which you want to focus on when you're learning art, right? You want to always focus on the important parts, on the stuff that you can see. But this is one of these things, it's like a building. It's the foundation of the building. If you rush this, you're rushing absolutely everything and nothing is going to work. So definitely make sure that you get your skeleton right. Very cool. So, I mean, let me just sculpt some stuff. That sounds like fun. So we can sculpt a character based on this. Actually, what we can do this with I'm just gonna sculpt some more of a fantasy character. Using C-spheres for this is fantastic. So C-spheres for sculpting is brilliant. Here I also have the Flipgnomes anatomy bust right here, so you can see the orientation, and we can also just see the some quick anatomy as well. So I'm just gonna quickly block out this. This is where I always prefer to start with the hips, just because this is really nice and easy to work with from a technical C-sphere point of view. So just starting off with the hips. And what we're doing now is basically bones, right? This is what we discussed so far, the first hour of this stream. It's all just bones. How long did it take for you to learn anatomy? No, I haven't really learned anatomy yet. It's one of these tricky things. Anatomy is one of these things. It's like with language. How long did it take me to learn English? Well, it just depends. Like at some point, like when did I start to understand conversations in English, or when did I start to be able to write in English, or when was I fluent in English, right? Same thing with anatomy. At what point are you fluent in anatomy? Man, I don't know. It's such a hard question. Like I still have to look stuff up when it comes to anatomy. I mean, I guess I was kind of comfortable with anatomy about like 2011 or something. That was after I took the Scott Eaton course. That was when I started, like, anatomy started kind of making sense to me. But I mean, I've been learning more about anatomy in the last year because I've been prepping for the Intro to Anatomy course, and like I have like a character art mentorship as well that I do on the side. That I've just been going through a lot of different anatomy that way. Okay, cool. This is actually a pretty good base. So let's go into, this is a kind of cool tip as well. If you go under C tool or tool and then go all the way to the bottom, and here we have adaptive skin, and you can see here this is annoying because currently this is just taking all the, like, it's dynameshing it, even though it doesn't look like it. But if we set the dynamesh resolution to 0, somehow we have topology. Don't ask me. So this is good enough for what I want to do. Then we have to go to make Polymesh 3D. This is one of the annoying things. I once did a mentorship where I sculpted a whole character in this mode, like this, because you can keep moving stuff around. Then I accidentally hit the A key, and I was like, it was all gone. Like I added subdivision levels and everything, and it was just all gone. So that was very painful. So I lost lost all the work there. So when it comes to this, you need to. I just go through this and I just inflate things like this as well. It's really useful to go over an inflate brush just to do this. And then I'm going to show you a cool trick. I'm going to go under, I'm going to move this guy over here. I don't know why this is on the left side. I need this to be on the right side. Almost. Wrong left. There we go. Cool. So there we go. We have the skeleton here, which is really useful to have. I'm just going to merge this together. So subtool and then merge visible. And here we have this guy right here. Then we're just going to go under our PM3D and then paste and take our little guy like so and scale this up. And this is cool because now check this out. Boom. Can now just look at this. So now we have good reference. Then I can go in here and I can just go in and I can go boom. And that's the only thing I want to see now. So we're just going to smooth out some of these things and just make sure it's working. Exactly what I'm sculpting now, I don't really know. Which means I'm doing a cardinal sin, and it's at least an 80% chance that I'm going to be arrested and go to siege jail before the night is over. Because if you don't use referencing, you don't have an idea, you're committing some pretty serious crimes. So, just moving this stuff around like so. I guess it's still better to make your base in another software like Blender, right? Well, it depends. The way I like to think about it is you can optimize for different things, meaning you can have different outcomes in mind. If you want to learn as much as possible, do it like this. This is a fantastic way to learn, but if you want the best end result, then having another base mesh. Personally, if you just want the best end result, don't even make a base mesh, just buy a base mesh. There are so many good base meshes out there, and making it yourself is just going to take a lot of time. So getting a base mesh, we also have plenty of base meshes in ZBrush as well. Like we have like NIXC human male average. This one here is pretty good. So there are a lot of good ones that you can work with. This is a fantastic question by Sculpted Stash. I want to actually make a YouTube video on this as well. This is how good the question is. Basically, as a beginner sculptor, should I invest time in learning to draw, or should I focus on sculpting? Well, if you want to be a character artist in 3D, you should absolutely be spending your time on 3D. There are benefits to learning how to draw as well, but if you're going to be a character artist, a 3D character artist, you should be in large part spending your time on 3D. Learning to draw might help. The caveat here is that it might also not. There's no guarantee that if you get good at drawing that you get good at doing 3D character art. Like I was good at drawing portraits when I was a teenager. I was just copying pictures, right? So if you get good at like painting in Photoshop or something, or doing something like that, does not in any way guarantee you that you're going to learn anything or get even remotely better at doing 3D. Could, absolutely could, but also you have like two parts to being a character artist. You have the fundamental part, which is the understanding part. This is what we're going through now, understanding how things work, and then you have the more basic part, which is how software works. And both are really hard, and the more you learn, the more comfortable you get with the software. And then the more you learn, the more it makes sense to focus on the more fundamental part, which is the drawing part, the observation part. But if you don't know how to operate the software, you're just going to be in trouble. And you learn the software by using the software a lot. So in short, I highly recommend that if you're a beginner, or if you want to learn how to become a character artist, do 3D character art. Drawing is something that you can kind of have on the side, but you get better at doing 3D by doing 3D. You don't automatically get better at doing 3D by doing 2D. But yeah, like there's a comment here as well, that you often find yourself getting better at both, because there is like a deeper level of understanding of observation and such. I was doing the same thing as well. I was drawing a lot as a teenager and such, and I was also doing 3D, and I noticed that every single time my drawings got better, my 3D would also improve. But that's because you get a better understanding of just everything by doing that. It's more that you have a finite amount of time, and I highly recommend that you spend that time on sculpting. So I'm just trying to get the proportions in, but proportion again doesn't really exist, right? Proportion is just the relationship between different parts. So it's just the size of the bones, the length of the bone. How do you maintain going to the gym and working? I used to go before work when I was in VFX. I still do when I'm not in VFX. just get in as a routine. I think it's really important to keep fit when doing this, because man, we're gonna sit a lot, and if you don't maintain build some healthy routines, you're just gonna be in for a world of pain. It's really important to build a strong body, I think. Just getting in these parts here. What I'm doing now is I'm essentially just trying to get in the main gesture of some kind of character, and I'm just doodling really. I don't really have a direction for this. I'm just trying to get in the main shapes, trying to get in the hips, try to get it in the ribcage and such. And then we kind of see where this goes. Maybe this turns into something interesting. Maybe it does not. And either will be okay. It's about the process, right? It's not just so much about the final result, unless you're working for somebody or unless you are building a portfolio, then it's very much about the final result. But if you're just doodling on a, I suppose, Tuesday evening today, then it's all just about just having fun, just exploring things. Do you miss working in the industry? Do you recommend others become independent or create their own courses? Do you have a course on how to create courses? Actually, we do have a course on how to create courses. If you check our YouTube channel, which I suppose you will be on right now, we just released 4 videos on how to create courses. Do I recommend it? I mean, it's a tricky one, because what you're doing then is you're essentially becoming, like if you want to make courses or you want to do something else, you're essentially becoming your own business. And the question is then, do I recommend that you start your own business? You know, if you're a freelance, you're essentially just a one-person agency. And if you're making courses, you're essentially just a one-person Flipnomals, right? Like it's tricky. It's tricky to do it. It depends. For us, it was worth it, but you need to be a bit of a crazy person to also do it as well. Because even though the industry is, you know, up and down and all that kind of stuff, it's still more stable than doing your own thing, in a sense. Because at least unless you have like a good reputation and such, and people really know you, it's really hard, because then if you're in a studio, you have producers whose job it is to keep the projects coming, and they deal with accounting and legal and all that kind of stuff. But now if you're doing stuff yourself, you have to figure out all this kind of stuff yourself, and you're not qualified to do that. So that's what Morten and I had to do. We had to learn all the stuff about like legal and accounting, and really just how to keep the lights on, right? Speaking of keeping the lights on, we have a very nice summer sale going on right now. So I highly recommend that you check out, if you're interested, check out flipnomals.com. We have a lot of really, really, really good courses, which went right here. So we have a lot of really interesting courses like this one here that we just talked about before, a realistic character portrait masterclass. We also have a bunch of other really good courses as well. We have the Flipnomals Face VDMs that we launched pretty recently, actually. I'm going to send this in the chat. This is a really cool course. This is not a course, it's a really cool resource. It's just a bunch of face VDMs that allows you to just whip out characters super fast. So yeah, make sure to check out flipnomals.com for that. Bunch of really cool stuff. I'm excited every single time I go on Flipnomals, because we have so many awesome creators. We have so many awesome reference packs and resources. So it's really cool to see what we've been able to put together here. Like you have basically all the resources you need to learn CG and to get good, to make CG faster. There's so many cool things on Flipnomals. I'm planning to attend Gnomon. Should I focus on what I want for my portfolio or learn everything the school provides? The first caveat about Gnomon is that you should be damn sure that you can afford Gnomon, because that is really, really, really expensive. Not impossible, just very, very expensive. It's for most people, it's prohibitively expensive. So just be sure that you can genuinely afford it, and don't afford it in the sense that you need student loans, but actually you know how to pay for that. If you don't really have a plan for paying for Gnomon, then you probably should not be going to Gnomon. I've seen a lot of people who, it turns into a bit of a different discussion, but I've seen a lot of people who are like $200,000 in debt because they attend the schools. That's very rarely worth it. In terms of what you should focus on if you do want to attend school X, or in this case Gnomon, we'll figure out what requirements they have, and then build that. Just focus on everything you can to get into the school, and then you can worry about what you want later, because then you're building a portfolio, right, in school. By the way, do you have any plans on doing more chill sculpt streams like last summer? Yeah, probably. Like you're just doing a little bit of talking, Q&A. This is obviously a lot easier when we're two people, because then we can like one can just sculpt and the other one can just talk. It's a lot harder to sculpt and talk at the same time than to just focus on one. All right, cool. This is fine for now. Obviously looks rough, but it's fine. It's fine so you can get started with something. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be, actually subdivide this a bit more. Then I'm going to just be adding the bones. Just adding in the ribcage. It's really fun doing these sculpts, or doing these streams rather. It's pretty intense to do as well, because it's it's a lot of talking. I mean, the first hour of this I just spent talking on about very specific anatomy things. So just remember the Mickey Mouse ears we just talked about. If you are joining now, you will have no idea what I'm talking about with Mickey Mouse ears, but people who've been here for a while, they're gonna know what I'm talking about. Getting the Mickey Mouse ears, getting in the iliac crest up here, getting in the sacrum down here. Once you've been sculpting for a while as well, it becomes almost like writing or drawing or something like that, where you can just kind of write down what you want. You can just kind of doodle what you with like complex anatomy. But you need to have done that for a while. Getting in the scapulas here, getting in the acromion process right here. Getting in the sternum right here. Moving up the angle of the rib cage. Getting in the sternum, getting in the clavicles. Getting in the femur. In here, this is the greater trochanter, the GT needs to go here. Then this goes down like so, and here we have the two little condyles. Then we have the patella here. Then we have the tibia going down like so. Then we have the fibula going down here, head of the fibula here, going down in like so. I can't find the Intro to Anatomy course. Has it been released yet? Nope, it's still in production. I finished editing it yesterday, and I've sent it to, we currently have only one beta tester on it, and when he has approved the whole thing, there are definitely some changes, then we are going to do marketing materials for it, make a little trailer, and then we are going to release it. I think we're talking about a month for that, because I'm also going on vacation next week as well for a few days. What is the hardest anatomical area to learn, and why is it the forearm? Yes, why indeed is it the forearm? This is so tricky. It's a genuinely useful, good question. Why is it the forearm? The reason it is the forearm, good question, is because of this madness. It's because of all this crap here. It's because this stuff is very, very complicated. There are just a lot of muscles, but also you have two main levels of complexity. First one, you have actually 3 levels of complexity. I almost hit my head on the microphone there. The first one is the fact that the arm bends from here. So this goes up like so. This changes the arm. This changes the shape a lot. Number 2 is this rotates around itself. So the radius is going to rotate around here. This changes this a lot. And number 3 is that this also rotates down like so. So the forearm, stupidly hard to get right. But yeah, like another person like Evan is saying here, like the face is definitely the hardest. I separate out in terms of learning, that when I do the mentorship as well, I always separate out the portrait, which is neck and up, and everything else, because they were equivalent in terms of difficulty, I find, because the body is very mechanical. It's a series of understand the muscles and understand the bones and everything like that, but the face is much more about observation. Like the muscles in the the body. They're here to lift heavy things, like keeping your body weight up. It's going to be quite a lot of kilos, or it's about keeping your, or it's about like throwing things really hard, and all that kind of stuff. But the face is about subtle things. It's about subtle little landmarks. It's about subtle little facial expressions. The muscles here are not going, you're not going to see these muscles. You're never going to see these specific muscles here. It's all covered in fat and all that. So the bone is a lot more important for the face. So yeah, the face is a whole league of its own. Like you can take a PhD in just the jaw, I'm sure, right? So in terms of the body, basically neck and down, I think it's either the forearm or it's the back, specific like this region right here, or that's just because it's not because there are too many muscles, but because of the insane stuff of what can happen here. You can move your shoulder blades towards each other. There can be asymmetry in this. On the forearm here, like if you move this arm, this doesn't affect this arm, right? If you move this towards here, this affects what happens here. So there's just a lot of complexity in this area. The way I sculpt is also like I just block things in gradually, where we are just going in, adding some bony landmarks, and we're adding some muscles here. Something to keep in mind about muscles. We haven't really spoken about muscles today. You have the trapezius, and the trapezius goes to the clavicles. Really important to think about. I find that most people, when they talk about the trapezius or the traps, they just talk about the back part instead of it actually going to the front as well. But yeah, anatomy is just hard. It's just an inherently hard challenge to get right. Then you have the whole design part as well, right? That even if your anatomy is perfect, no one is going to care unless the character design is interesting. So it's really tricky. And the more you do this, the more you're going to shorthand, the more you kind of integrate into your hands, and the more you kind of automate. In the beginning, you have to do a lot more origin and insertion, but as you were sculpting, you just kind of integrate into your art, into your hand. Do you plan on doing any courses on learning the business finance of being an independent artist? In terms of the business finance part of that, there's nothing unique about an artist. Like you're just making you're basically just becoming a freelancer, like a sole contractor or sole vendor, right? Sole trader. So there isn't really anything specific we can do that. The problem with this as well is it depends so much on the jurisdiction you're in, like which country you're in. If you were to make a course for the UK, this would not be applicable to the US or Norway or Denmark or anything like that. Sure, there are some fundamental things here and there, like get paid on time and all that, but the specifics of contracts and legal stuff and all that, this stuff here is so specific. So it would be really hard to do. I'm not saying we aren't going to do it. We just haven't really thought about it. But that's just an inherent challenge of that. Also, we haven't really done freelance. Like Morten and I, we've been doing a bit of freelance here and there, but it was never our primary income. Like I did freelance when I was in school and such, and a little bit here and there. I've been teaching a little bit here and there on the side, but I really haven't done a lot of freelance as like a professional freelancer. So I'm just getting in the muscles as well. It's really useful to have a model like this on the left whenever I'm doing this. I'll actually show you guys how I approach the forearm in a bit. Just getting in the pecs. So you can see how fast you can start to block some stuff out. It's rough, yes, but this is what I'm talking about when I say trust the process. Because if you trust the process, then like if you know the process, then you know how to create a character basically. Like the process is bone, get the bones right, get the muscles right, get the fat right, get the skin right. And if your character doesn't look right, it's because one of these elements are incorrect. just getting in the stuff we know is going to be there. But usually whenever you're creating these kind of characters, when I create these characters, I prefer to have two kinds of reference. I prefer to have an anatomical reference like this, and then I also prefer to have real world reference as well, like as many photos as I can of some real living person, because this here is not sufficient. This is just a generic person, right? What's a good way to practice figurative sculpting, like asymmetrical sculpting? Honestly, you're like, this is gonna like take this in the best way possible. I don't mean any offense for this reply, but the best way to get better at figurative sculpting is just to do more figurative sculpting. Is honestly just to do it. How do you do it? You just get started. Try to create a character from scratch. Like, it doesn't really matter how you do it. If you want to learn how to do it, just start from a sphere, C-sphere, and just do the best you can. Find some good reference. That's really important, and then just go from there. And then here we need to get in the two bones. This is where we have the ulna going in like so. The hand is going to be a little bit weird. And the we're going to have one bone in here as well. The radius. So we can have two bones here. So it's going to be pretty bad, but that's what we have to deal with now. I want to make a YouTube video on this as well, just a bit more refined than what I'm doing now, without the slightly stuffed nose. So remember the two epicondyles we have, the 2 point bits we have for the humerus. This is where this becomes important, because now we have the ulna furrow right here. The ulna, this is just a furrow, just a depression going in here. And then here we have, up here, we have some ridge muscles. Ridge muscles just go down like so. Go down to around here. This is a really, really, really long bone as well. Just gonna make this shorter. Just something like this. A bit longer. Actually, this is okay. We just have to make sure there's a line here for the where the hand is going. So we have the ridge muscles going up like so, going up into the humerus here. And this goes wraps around here, goes down here about into the thumb. And then here we have a little American football, a little bit of a water balloon going down like so. And then here we have another one going from about here, going down here. How do you usually block out the hands? Oh, that's an easy one. I delete the hands and I steal them from a 3D model I've already made. The hands are so painful. The reason I do that is just because the hands are almost the complexity of a human body by itself. And I mean that in actually like a pretty real sense, that they basically have like as many limbs as we have, right? We have 2 arms and 2 legs and a body, and we have a head. This is 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head and a body. Like, in terms of like the simple shape of it, it is almost the same level of complexity as the human body, as of course a simplified version of the human body. But still, I want to talk about the muscles another day as well. We haven't really talked about this at all, so now we are skipping ahead a lot. So there's no reason you guys should know the muscles, you know, in this stream at least. But all this will hopefully be made clear. I'm very excited to get Intro to Anatomy out, because I'm presenting a lot of info I haven't really seen a lot of other places. Do you just dynamesh them together? Yep, that's exactly what I do. I just find a model I've already made, and then I just straight up just cut off the hand right here, like boop, and then you can just like delete hole, or close holes, or delete hidden, and then yeah, I have subdivision levels, doesn't work, but then delete that and put the other one in here, merge them together, then just dynamesh. It's dirty, but honestly, who has time for that, right? Like, if you're doing unless you're learning to make hands, then of course you have to do this properly. But if you're just sculpting for fun, hands are not fun unless you specifically want to learn how to do hands. Very painful. doing the external obliques. They go from the ribs up here, go down here, then they go down here, and the iliac crest, if we talked about before. The head of the Mickey Mouse ears. You don't have to retopo that. I mean, yeah, if you were doing retopo, you have to do retopo anyway, right? But if you don't want to do retopo at all, just use a base mesh and just keep it simple. Like, retopo isn't a mandatory step of a character. Like, if you're making a generic looking character, like, and you're just doing this for either for money, right, or for a, or if you just need the end result to look as good as possible, I don't really see a whole lot of reasons to do retopo apart from showing people that you understand how to do retopo. Would you recommend ZBrush as a hard surface tool? Personally, no. I think ZBrush is a weird tool for that. There are some people who are black wizards at that. They can perform insane feats of magic. I find it to be lacking in terms of control. For concepting, I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff there. Probably one of the best hard surface tools at the moment is probably Blender, because you have like the box cutter and all that kind of stuff. Really, 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 let's say, cutting edge stuff. No pun intended. There's so much good stuff in Blender for hard surface right now. Though, of course, if you need to do something highly specific, then yes, ZBrush is fantastic for that, for hard surface. But as a general hard surface, no, I don't prefer it. Is this Ecrochet on the Flip Normal site, Henny? No, this is a... some people are saying the site is down. But if you search for just open source or C anatomy, just like Z anatomy, and then you just go to just Z anatomy Blender, you're gonna find it there. This is a like, if you can't find it there, I know some people put it up on Gumroad as well. So like, just for free, so because it's an open source project. So yeah, just check it out there. I've modified mine a fair bit. No, I haven't really changed any muscles or anything. Just a little bit. I've rotated around the hands, but what I've done is I just simplified it down, because there's so much stuff in the original one, so it's way too complicated. Do you use C Modeler? Nope. Yeah, Chaos Masons is crazy at ZBrush hard surface. Yep. I mean, like, there are people who are really good at that, and it's not like, my opinion as a ZBrush hard surface modeler isn't honestly worth a whole lot, because I'm not a hard surface modeler. I just, whenever I'm doing hard surface modeling, I do most like props and such. So, you know, like giving people some armor or modeling a pen or something, right? So the disadvantage of using ZBrush for modeling is, for hard surface modeling, is that you need to retopologize it afterwards, because you particularly if you're doing like some household objects, right? If you were to make like a coffee cup or something like that, you have to retopo it afterwards. So unless you have something incredibly novel, that I don't really find it to be any point in doing that. But yeah, like, you know, there are people who are fantastic at that, but it depends on what you want to do, right? For hard surface, what does hard surface even mean? There are some people who are just like designers, and there are some people who are just like modelers, right? Where they need full control over everything. And I keep doing this. I keep putting my arms too far back. Just move it a bit more forward. Adam is saying, hello, I got a lot of value out of your Sculpting Fundamentals course. That's Intro to Sculpting. So thank you much for your content and help. Well, thank you so much. I'm working on a similar course to that one now, which is a sister course to Intro to Anatomy. Should be out in a month or so, maybe, called Intro to Anatomy. Did I say Intro to Sculpting before? It's Intro to Sculpting. That's the course he's been taking. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm going to continue this for, let's see how long we've been doing this. I was thinking about doing this for 2 hours. I'm doing this for 1 hour and 34 minutes, which means we have 1 hour and 26 minutes left. Oh, this is an interesting one. But Shaq Move. Hi Henning. This might be off topic question, but is it normal for game studios to hold a job offers, or it depends? I'm currently waiting for it for 3 months. I'm always in contact with them, and they said it was due to project directions, though I was already guaranteed to be hired. They said you're guaranteed to be hired if you have a contract. If you don't really have a contract, then you aren't really guaranteed to be hired. Basically, don't trust their words on it. Trust the contract. This is something that happens a fair few times, where something can happen with a project. It's of no fault of anyone. It just happens. Projects gets cancelled, or something happens to it, and if you're not protecting yourself, you can be in a lot of trouble. I know some people who were offered, I don't know them personally, but I heard about them when I was in VFX. There were some people who moved from like Brazil to London, and then they were promised a job, and they were let go basically right away when they got there, or there was no job for them, even like major studios. So you gotta just protect yourself. It can be, yeah, don't trust them when they say something. Trust them when you have a contract. Because this happens. Yeah, of course we're going to hire you, and then after like 3-4 months they go like, yes, sorry, we just can't do that, and then can be in a lot of trouble. So if that's the case, I recommend just protecting yourself. Assume that job isn't really happening, and because I mean, you need the money, right? Like, you can't be without a job, and then look for alternative sources of income or other jobs. So I'm just going through the whole character now. Like, obviously it's pretty rough, but that's fine. We can just if your character looks like this and is rough, just trust the process. Are the bones in the right spot? No. Are the muscles in the right spot? No. Is the fat in the right spot? Also no. Is the skin in the right spot? Also no. How can you expect it to be in the right looking good then? So I'm just gonna subdivide this. So then we can just start to refine a lot of things. Not even like final refine. We're just going over it and just building things up. My method is very methodical. I know there are some people who have like a much more optimized sculpting workflow, where they just put down a few strokes. I like to build things up methodically. How much real anatomy is translated over when doing stylized characters? I mean, a lot. Really, first it depends on how stylized you're going. There isn't such a thing as like stylized, right? It depends on how you're stylizing it. But like, the foundation is there. Like, it means you're with general stylized, right? Let's just assume that's the thing. You're like for Pixar or something, right? You're not going to like take like the Incredibles, right? Like, you're not going to take all the muscles and necessarily muscle sim them or something like that. But the main volumes are there. What's definitely true is the skeleton is going to be quite close, at least in a simplified way, just because you need that for articulation, for rigging and such. So fundamentally, a lot of it is going to be the same. If you're trying to do a stylized character and you're trying to like animate them or rig them or something like that, but let's assume it's more human, and the skeleton is completely wrong, it's never going to work. It's so tricky. That's why I always recommend to learn realism, and then if you would prefer to do stylized, totally fine, great. Stylized is awesome, but at least learn realism, because then at least you know what's true, and if you know what's true, you can simplify it down. But if you don't know what's true, it becomes really difficult to simplify it down. bit off topic, but how would you texture a realistic human with dark skin? A bit hard for me because there's not much reds, yellows, and blues going on. Honestly, I would do it in the exact same way as I would do with somebody with light skin. I would look at what the skin, see what the skin looks like, and like project some stuff from reference and go from there. Be very reference based. Like there isn't such a, like my skin color is different from my girlfriend's skin color. She's from a Mediterranean country, and I'm from Norway. So we're still like white, but it's still quite a different skin color. So essentially, don't make assumptions. Something you have to be aware of as well. This is something I see more with dark skin than with whiter skin, is that there is more contrast in the reflection. Like meaning that if you have something that's dark, it's easy. There is just easier to see reflections on it. So it's easier to accidentally confuse reflections with the albedo color. So you might on darker skin, sometimes it might look blue or something, but that could be reflections from the environment as well, and you wouldn't necessarily see that much on lighter skin. So figure out what the albedo color is and go with that color, and just start to use that color. Like projecting something is a really good idea. Try to find polarized images, like cross polarized images, and just go with that. And then you just smooth it around. Just go crazy with smoothing. A brush that's really cool for smoothing is Smooth Stronger. This is fantastic. It just nukes everything. So I currently have a lot of brush strokes and such, which is cool, but not particularly useful because it looks noisy. So now we can just go over this and just simplify this kind of stuff down. Yeah, here's a question about like what courses to use for learning anatomy. We have a few here that are really good. We have the fundamentals of anatomy for sculptors, which is fantastic. This is done by Christian Bull, who's an absolute brilliant artist. It focuses more on the fundamentals. It doesn't really focus on too much what we've been going through in the stream now. Which has been very like the very core of anatomy. It focuses more on like observation and like specific, like kind of almost like the finalizing of it in some ways, where it's just about like the very core of it. Really, really, really important. But if you want the specific origin and assertion, that kind of stuff is hard to find. I'm working on that now, but I assume you already know that. I recommend Intro to Anatomy as well, just because a lot of the anatomy issues you think you're having are actually just core sculpting issues. But then, yeah, just stay tuned for the Intro to Anatomy course I'm working on as well. This is why I'm working so hard on the Intro to Anatomy course, because I keep getting this question: which course should I be getting? And I've always had the issue with this where I want to be a character artist. Okay, cool, you have to learn anatomy. How do I learn that? And I'm like just shrugging. It's like crazy. So it's tricky, right? How do you learn anatomy? Well, you just have to go through a lot of different books. So I just had to make a course on that. So I've been working on that for a while now. It took me a year to prep, just because, my God, there's a lot of stuff you have to know about anatomy. I've been doing anatomy for a long time now. Worked as a professional character artist in film. Still don't really know my anatomy right, because whenever you're sculpting stuff for production, a lot of times you just have reference like this and you're sculpting based on this and such, but actually teaching anatomy is such a different beast compared to just knowing how to do something. It's just a whole different thing. Are there any art schools you recommend in Europe for character artists? Honestly, most schools, universities are not good for character art. That's just the way it is. Just because they just don't really teach you that. Very few. I haven't really seen a single university or school in Europe that would actually be good for character art. I mean, I went to the animation workshop. Morten also went to the animation workshop in Denmark, and while there are some character artists who come by as teachers here and there, it's not like you spend a year in it or something, right? Like I keep saying this, that if you want a good character artist education, check out the Flip Normal's YouTube and check out the courses. And I genuinely mean it, that you are going to get a better education that way than any university in the world. And yes, the courses we have are solid, but it's not even because of a boasting thing. It's almost like a negative thing. It's just because you just want to learn a lot about character art from universities. So yes, our courses are, I think they're pretty good. I'm biased, of course, but it's just a case that you just will not learn a lot about character art from regular schools. One of the reasons is just because it's really, really, really hard to teach character art, or it's really rare to be a good character artist who knows how to teach as well. And if you know how to do that, you're going to make a lot more money teaching courses or working freelance than you are as a teacher. So that's just the reality of it. It's really, really, really hard to find somebody who's a good character artist who will also be teaching at a university. Yeah, here's a good question. This is, what would you say is the biggest difference between tendons and a muscle belly? So let's talk about some muscle stuff here. So if we have a look at the bone here, and here we have the bicep. So the bicep brachii in this case, because we have one in the leg as well. This is really cool because here we have the muscle belly, and this is contracting. The only thing a muscle can do is to get shorter. A muscle can't pull outwards, it can only pull inwards. So this means that this guy here will only ever get smaller. Like, yes, you can stretch it out, but there's no power in that. If you want to pull the arm upwards from here to here to here to here, basically, you know, you're doing a curl, the only thing that can happen is this will get shorter. So in order for this to work, we need to attach the belly of the muscle to bone, and this is just done through tenon. And these are the things you're seeing here. This is the white stuff you're seeing on anatomical drawings. You have red for this stuff and you have white for the tendons. The difference here is that tenon doesn't really get shorter or longer. Tenon is almost just like a strip of like leather attaching to it. So this doesn't compress or stretch, and the muscle belly does. So this is really important to keep in mind, because a lot of times one of the biggest mistakes people do is that they are connecting the muscle belly to the origin insertion instead of the tenon, which means that the muscle gets absurdly long and it just doesn't work. In some muscles, this is a really, really cardinal sin. Like here, for instance, with the lats, like all of this is all just tenon. So some muscles just have an insane amount of tenon. So tenon, really important stuff. What made you want to talk about anatomy today? I think that anatomy is something that, specifically bones, is something that a lot of people don't really know anything about, and they keep skipping it. So I want to dedicate some time to that because it's a very important topic, and it's not a lot of stuff on that on YouTube. A lot of people, they talk about like it's what I mentioned before, they either go way too in depth. They're like, all right, let's go through the 206 bones in the body, and they speak in such a fancy and like impossible to understand way, or people are just simplifying it way too much. But actually doing a good mix, like what I was trying to do now, where yeah, we're going into the real anatomy, into the real bones that we have, but also this is how you can actually memorize the bloody things, right? That's kind of what inspired me, but also because I have all this fresh in memory. So doing this lecture here a year ago would have been really difficult to me, because it's just inherently really hard stuff to do. So I have it fresh in memory because I've been editing this entire week. I've been editing Intro to Anatomy, and before that I was recording Intro to Anatomy. So I've never been as fresh at anatomy as I'm currently am right now, and I probably won't be this fresh at anatomy for some time as well, because this is this kind of stuff that you often forget. So I want to just be sure that we will be able to get some of this out in a nice little stream before this is lost to oblivion. It's going to be a case where in some years I'm going to do a refresher on anatomy. I'm going to be looking at my own courses and I'm going to go like, man, I never knew that. Then it's me talking to me. I've done that before. It's so weird. Where the weird thing is if you're like, oh yeah, that's how I do the thing. Like it might be a modeling tool or something. It might look into Blender and be like, oh yeah, that's how I do the extrusion using some insane way. Never knew that. But the weird thing is when I knew it because I was teaching it. That's really the most insane thing. How did you prepare for the Intro to Anatomy course? Actually, one of the ways I was doing that is I have a character artist mentorship outside of Flipnomal, so you can just find that if you go to henningsanden.com, where I've just been drilling anatomy over and over and over again in a lot of students over the last few years, like last year and a half or so. And just by doing that, I really learned a lot. Every single time I was teaching that, I learned a lot. But I also just been studying it a lot as well. I've been going through a lot of these anatomical models and just trying to learn it. One of the best ways you can learn anatomy is to teach anatomy. Like by far. That's like by far the best ways to learn anatomy. Of course, that's tricky, right? Because you have to actually know some anatomy. But trying to teach something to other people is by far one of the best ways. But on that, one way you can actually learn anatomy in a very effective way is to make this model here from scratch without reference. Go. That's insanely hard. The reason you need to do it without reference is that then you're putting down everything you know. You're generally putting down everything you know about the bones and the muscles. And then once you inevitably fail, because you will fail, because this is it's an impossible exercise to get right, then you do it again, but now with reference. And then you keep going back and forth between these two. And then you're going to learn anatomy real fast. Because then you're really going into like power mode when it comes to anatomy. Yeah, I cover how to sculpt realistic skin in more in depth in the intro to sculpting. This is already live on the site. It's one of these I don't really have time to cover that right now. It's a very, very, very big topic on how to sculpt realistic skin. And you really have to dedicate as much time to the body as you do to the portrait, and vice versa. We're spending most of the time currently on the portrait, on the body, so I just have to spend some time on the portrait. Again, I don't really have any reference for this. I'm just kind of doodling right now, just looking at the anatomy. So what I'm sculpting now is just kind of just imagination stuff. It's a lot of fun to sculpt from imagination. It never looks particularly good compared to if you're sculpting from reference, but it's a lot of fun. You can also notice I'm using the clay buildup with alpha 06 and a very low intensity alpha. So, or very low intensity brush, the C intensity. That works really well. Can it be good anatomy with just ref I sculpt 4 hours every day? Oh yeah. 4 hours is a lot for anatomy studies every single day. It's more important to sculpt for a bit every single day and study every single day than it is to just go completely ham on it for about a week and then never do it again. Like if you were to break it down into anatomy, if you were to look at this kind of stuff, it looks insanely complicated, but this is something Christian Bull says in his videos, that anatomy is just complexity built from simplicity. So each one of the shapes isn't that hard. How many muscles could you learn each day? 2, 3 maybe, without too many problems? Then you don't have that many muscles in the arm, for instance. Like here you have deltoid, bicep, brachialis, tricep, 4 muscles. Boom, you just solved all this in one day. Yes, it's tricky, and it's not that you can go from 0 to that, but you can learn the names, you can try to sculpt them, you can learn the main shapes of them, and then you can learn the forearm. Forearms can take you a few days. You have basically 3-4 main volumes in the forearm as well, depending on how you define it. The back, you have like 5-6 muscles that you have to really memorize. So it can take you a few weeks just to get coverage for the whole body in terms of main muscles. And then you just sculpt a lot. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Don't go into the don't go in and look at every single origin and assertion, all the fancy names in the beginning. It's just impossible to memorize all that. Keep in mind that the reason you're really sculpting anatomy or you're learning anatomy is so that it's applicable. It's not just a checklist, right? You're not doing this for a test for school. It's so that you can genuinely learn this for your own characters. Then we're going to sculpt his butt. Something to remember when it comes to sculpting the butt is that there's a lot of fat on the butt. Like, there's a lot of gluteal fat. And you can think about this in a very logical way, that if you were to be sitting down on a chair and you don't have a soft cushion on your butt, it's just going to be really, really, really painful. So it's really important that you have a lot of fat there. Otherwise, you're just going to be breaking your bones every single time you're sitting. The whole how do you practice to get the best results for anatomy or any kind of art, that's such a tricky one. The reason that it's like a debated topic is because there isn't one way of doing it. It's the whole thing, right? You have somebody who's like 110 years old and their advice to how to get the whole was to like smoke every single day and drink whiskey. Yeah, it's not necessarily good advice, but it worked for some people, right? Yeah, it's the same thing with art. You have some people who's just they did it in a bad way and it still worked out real well for them, and you had people who did it in the correct way and it did not work out for them. Art is so tricky when it comes to that. It's not like it is not like a regulated field, right, where you need a permit to do it, and it's highly subjective. So it's really tricky to do it. You can never find consensus on what works for learning art or not. Some people can just sit and just brute force things. Like, for instance, if I'm learning new 3D software, I can sit with a whole day just with the manual YouTube videos and just grind there. By myself is how I learned Blender and Substance Painter, tons of other software, Maya, everything. Sat down with the manual and just went for it. And it's like I come out of a room like Matrix style and being like, I know Maya now. And some people, they just need to sit down in a classroom and just be told how stuff works. We have tons of tutorials where we go through that, and they're pretty popular tutorials, and there is a reason for that. It's because a lot of people learn that way. One way is not better than the other. There are so many ways to learn. When are you planning your next stream? Hopefully tomorrow. Maybe we can even convince Morten to join as well, if he's feeling better. He was not feeling super today, so no Morten stream, no MJ stream for him today. Yeah, Greg is saying, I'm a one-on-one learner, unfortunately. Yep, some people are like that. Like, it's really not about... Like, I used to be like, well, I learned in a more, like, hardcore way, right? Like, again, lock me in a room with YouTube and documentation, and I'm going to come out of there like some days later and just know that. And I was like, well, that's obviously the best way to learn. Everyone should learn that way. And if they can't learn that way, they're just not good at learning. They're just not motivated. No, but some people just don't learn that way. It's not about good or bad or smart or not smart. It's just about how do you genuinely learn. If you need somebody to be there for you, that's just how you need to structure your learning, right? It's one of the reasons I offer mentorships, because I know there are a lot of people who just need to be told how to do something, right? And there are some people who don't really work well with that. They just need to grind a lot. what's universal for everyone is you need feedback on your stuff. Like you need feedback to some degree. There was somebody some years ago who I was talking to who was like almost proud about learning Maya without tutorials. I was like, but why on earth are you learning Maya without tutorials? Yes, you don't have to sit down with like introduction to Maya and go through every single tool, but if you don't watch tutorials in the software you're trying to learn at some point, you're going to mess it up. You're going to learn it, you're going to use it in the wrong way. You're going to use the wrong hotkeys and not good, correct workflows. If you, for instance, come from Maya to Blender and you just brute force it and you don't watch tutorials, you're going to be using Blender wrong. You're going to be using Blender as Maya, and that's the wrong way of doing it, because now you're not adapting to it. So you need to watch tutorials just to some degree, right? Just to be sure that you're actually using it in a correct way. Otherwise, might work kind of, but you're just going to be ineffective at what you're doing. So watching tutorials to like really refine your workflow is highly, highly, highly recommended. I do that all the time. All right, just taking a little bit of a break here. We've been going for actually 2 hours. I'm just gonna do a little bit more. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, here's another comment from Greg. The only way I've ever learned software is by staying in a Discord call with an expert for like 2 hours as I try to do something, I lay down the foundation, and then I'm good. Yeah. That's also why we have a Discord, right? We have a Flip Normals Discord. And it's really cool to see on the Flip Normals Discord. I'm sure there are some people from there now as well. That it's been live for 5 years now, because that's as long we've been full-time for Flip Normals. So we quit our jobs in DNEG. There are people who's gone from like very junior artists, like high schoolers, to working at studios like ILM, which is insane to see, right? Like you can go from a beginner to actually working at some of the biggest VFX studios in the world. I keep seeing this over and over again. You had people who were juniors at the time, or they might have been juniors in university, or they were in high school, or they were like finishing up university. Now some years later, they're like proper industry professionals. Awesome to see. Is Blender a good substitute for sculpting if you don't have access to ZBrush? Depends what you want to do. If you want to learn the software, yeah, it's great. If you want to learn sculpting, yeah, it's fine. It's great for learning that. In terms of like production work and such stuff like that, it's not good enough. Like you're missing too many features. You're missing layers. The sculpting brushes aren't good enough. The sculpting field just isn't good enough. It really doesn't support the same poly count. It's just not good enough for compared to ZBrush, and it makes sense. ZBrush can basically do one thing, and that's sculpting. It can do it really well, while Blender can do many things, and it hasn't really had a proper sculpting pass in years now. You know, you had the Pablo pass, like, what was that, 4 years ago now, where it improved drastically. But even now there are like, even, you know, when you do the first stroke and then you have to undo it, even that takes a long time. Well, ZBrush is just a tested piece of software. It's just not comparable to ZBrush. That said, though, there are still some stuff that's better in Blender. Like for instance, you have multiple cameras, like proper camera support, which is awesome. You can actually look at your character through proper 3D cameras and such, which is brilliant. I love that. But core sculpting, nope. Do you play games? Oh yes, I've been playing Diablo a lot. It's really annoying because you had Tears of the Kingdom coming out, and then I was just getting started with that. Then Diablo 4 comes out, and I'm like, man. So yeah, I've been playing favorite games. I didn't really play games for like 10 years. I played it as a teenager, and then I didn't really play it until like I got a Nintendo Switch. I played like Super Mario Odyssey and such, and was like, how do I play games again? I could feel that this was a skill I just basically lost. It just took me quite some time to get back into that. Actually, when I'm editing the intro to, well, I just finished that yesterday, but when I'm editing courses, I also play video games. Like when I was editing Intro to Anatomy, I was just playing Diablo. Not because it's a lazy thing, but just because I kind of have to, because it's... I'm listening to myself for, like, that was a 17 hour, it was 1,050 minutes. Of recording, and I can't listen to myself without doing anything. It just makes me completely crazy. So yep, Diablo was a savior there. And also like simple games, right? I can play simple games like Diablo. Usually I play Mario Kart because it's just racing, which means I got really good at Mario Kart and none of my friends want to play me now. But I can't play anything story driven, right, while doing that. What do you think about UE5? Yeah, it looks awesome. Don't really have any more thoughts about that. I never used Unreal Engine. It looks absolutely mad. How do you learn to sculpt clothing? You can either go the hardcore route, which is just try to sculpt it, straight up find reference and try to sculpt it, or you can kind of go the smart route, which is to learn Marvelous Designer. Marvelous is how they do it in production. Sculpting cloth is really difficult. It's really, really hard to do. It's cool to just see the character kind of coming together. And you can see up here, it's getting decent, that it gets as rougher and rougher and rougher the further down you go. This muscle here pisses me off, specifically. This is called the soleus muscle. The reason this pisses me off so much is because that's named after sandal in Latin, because it looks like a sandal. It's so nonsensical, like the naming of it. I wish we could just rebuild the whole anatomical nomenclature system, like all the anatomical terms, because it's so overly complicated. But it is what it is, and that's never going to change, so we just have to accept it. But I can still be mad about it. Like, it's hard enough to learn anatomy as it is, just because it's difficult. Then you have a fancy name called soleus, named from sandal, because it looked like a sandal. It's just insane. That's why I don't really bother too much with the names, particularly in like Intro to Anatomy course. Simply because it just gets very, very, very difficult. You want to be sure to, when it comes to anatomy, to focus on the correct thing. The correct thing when you're learning anatomy is not just memorizing the names. If you've just memorized the names there, you're going to remember the names, but you're not going to know anything else. You're not going to know the function and how to simplify it down. The goal is really that you can use this in a practical sense. Is Marvelous hard to learn? Marvelous as a tool is very easy to learn. I don't personally know how to use Marvelous, but I've been seeing enough tutorials of Morten, and my girlfriend uses Marvelous a lot at work, that the tool itself would probably take you like an hour to learn or something. The hard thing is patterning. The hard thing is learning to become a tailor. Same thing with ZBrush, right? The software itself is not particularly hard to learn, like in terms of sculpting, right? The tricky thing is learning to become a sculptor. How much time do game companies take to respond to job applications? Yeah, that depends so much. In a lot of cases, they're probably not going to get back to you. That's probably like depending on your skill set. A lot of companies just never get back to you, unfortunately. Hopefully they do, but it just depends from company to company. If they haven't responded in a while, shoot them another message. But if they don't get back to you, you just have to move on. I mean, I've applied for companies that I worked for that they didn't get back to me in the first years. Then I got some more experience, and then they got back to me, and I got the job. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. Applying for jobs is just really rough. It's no fun for anyone. How much will your Intro to Anatomy course cover in terms of anatomy? Well, that's a great question. Let me see if I can find the course page for that. Now I have the course page. I just have to bring this up to the correct monitor. Let's see. Also, just remember that we have a very exciting summer sale going on right now. So here we have introduction to sculpting, focusing on basically everything you need to know about sculpting. Currently 40% off, focusing on learning how to. It's in 2 parts. One part is this one. This is part 2. Once you learned a lot about concepts, going through from a sphere to all the way to the end, learning about the concepts of anatomy, learning about squashing and stretching, learning about gesture, general sculpt overs, pores, different frequencies. But let's talk about intro to anatomy. So this is what I've been doing so far. This is my actual worksheet. This is how I do it. This is just a Notion. So we cover a lot of fundamental parts of it, like proportion, the different building blocks. This course isn't out yet, and this is how long it is as well. And how do you build up a character? Just in a more generic sense, that we have bones. What are bones? We have muscles, fat, skin, and then we go over a lot of anatomical terms, explaining that. Then we go over the torso, going in depth in the torso, going into the muscles, the front and the back, going into the skeleton of the arms, going into the arms, the upper arm muscles, quite in depth, like 25 minutes of that, going into the hand, just going through all this. You can just pause the video and the stream. Then we have a whole character. These have all been exported now, which is awesome. So just going over a whole character start to finish, starting from a very loose base mesh and just taking him through the entire thing. So yeah, that's really what we cover in Intro to Anatomy. I think it's 16 hours. I haven't checked it I haven't checked the final thing, but I'm pretty sure it's 16 hours. Did you already show how to use a split screen? I did not, but I can. It's transform, then split screen. And this just looks at the different polygroups or the different subtools you have. And here's actually an interesting question that I don't have a good answer to, but I'll explain a bit meta about that. Which one is better to learn if I want my first job as a 3D artist in indie or game studios? Oh, actually, I don't think I misunderstood that question. I thought it was which one is easiest to join, indie or big studio. Never mind me. Because I was going to say, like, basically, if that's in a correct interpretation of the question, which one is easiest to join, indie or big studio, then my answer is basically like you need to take anything with a grain of salt. Who somebody who's never worked in games industry. I never worked in the games, so if somebody who's never worked in a games company gives you very specific advice on gaming, you just need to take that with a grain of salt. I cannot answer highly specific questions about the gaming industry because I never worked in games. So if somebody claims that, for instance, if a game artist were to answer very specific questions about the VFX industry, like the film industry, they also would not know that unless they worked in that. Or if you have somebody with no experience answering very specific questions about either one of those, you need to just run away from that. Is there any date when the Intro to Anatomy will be coming out? Nope. Finished the course yesterday. It's just going to take some time. Probably a fair bit of editing. I'm hoping in about a month. That would be really, really, really nice, but can't really promise anything. It's more important to get it right than to rush it. It's done when it's done. But okay, cool. I'm going to be just finishing off right now. This is not the best thing in the world, but it's a fun little doodle, just without really any reference. So I can take a few more questions, and then we are just going to be stopping this because we are at 2 hours and 13 minutes and 44 seconds. And that's a long time for streaming. So yeah, let's just have a few more questions, and then from there I will bid you guys good night. What's the price tag for the Intro to Anatomy course? Honestly, don't really know. We haven't decided on that yet. Check out our other courses though for to see an approximate cost. It's probably gonna be in line with some of the other courses. We're not gonna do anything too fancy there, I think. But we don't really have any. We currently don't really have any pricing on that. But yeah, if there aren't any more questions, then I will just finish off with just letting you guys know once again about the sale that we currently have. It's one hell of a sale. It's the biggest sale ever in terms of how many products we have on sale. We have thousands and thousands of products. So just check out flipmomus.com and check out some of our awesome products. If all of our own products, all of the Flipmomus exclusives are currently 40% off. So check out our own ones, but there are also plenty of other fantastic courses here. So yeah, with that said, thank you guys so much for joining. We are going to be streaming a lot more this week, and I can't wait to see you guys there as well. So see you guys soon.